All right.
All right. Hey, everyone. This is Samir with Mohammed, my co-host. We are delivering this hands-on hour to you. This is our, I think, fourth session. And we have a special guest today. Today's guest barely needs an introduction in the Power Platform world. Nick Doelman, 7-time Microsoft MVP, Microsoft certified trainer, and 25 plus years of deep dive experience in Power Platform. Nick has contributed to Microsoft Learn heavily and make that wonderful, I would say. And today he's going to cover Power Pages and some agentic AI coding tools with us. But here's the part you might not know, okay? When Nick is not building Power Platform apps, he's on a powerlifting platform. He competes internationally with the IPF and recently represented Canada at World Championship in Poland. And he benches more than most of us will ever squat. So I would say thank you so much, Nick, joining us. I know you are strong, not only on a code, but strong on lifts as well. So please welcome Nick Doelman. And here we go, Nick.
Don't make him upset. So
yeah, thanks for the intro. That was good. Yeah, so let's I know there's a lot of stuff we want to cover today, and hopefully inspire people and kind of get them thinking about kind of new ways. So what I'm going to do is let me share my screen, and let's get the stack up and running. Move you guys over here and just kick that off. That's going to work. Here's what it's doing. Yeah, of course. Give me 2 seconds here. It's in the presenter mode. Or we can just present. I want to present in Teams. That always give me 2 seconds here. Sure. Let's try this instead. And then all right, so you guys see the same deck that you just showed, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's just sort of dive into it. We saw this one already, so let's kind of move on to the next one here. Talk about the new Power Pages. We're going to be creating secure data-driven websites using agentic coding tools. I had the great introduction, so we don't really need to go into that. But if you do need to find me later, if you have questions, whatever, reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you were not already connected, when you connect, just feel free to connect with me, but maybe just make you a little note that you saw me on the Canadian Cloud community thing, so we can make sure that we connect correctly there. So why is this, there we go. Why is this not working? That's what I want. All right. But yeah, I have my website as well. So yeah, check that out. Like I said, we've already had a good little intro. So what are we going to learn today? So basically, I'm just going to cover four different pillars here. Mastering agentic development. So I don't think anybody's a master yet for a couple of reasons. It is changing so much. So even stuff that I did a month or two ago, I'm already doing differently. Microsoft is releasing new tools. We see new skills coming out. We see things going from preview to GA. It's crazy how fast things are going. So it's kind of hard to keep up. But on the flip side, I'm also finding that when these things are working well, we can generate a lot of applications and things really quickly. So things that you've always done on the back burner, some special projects or things that customers have wanted, guess what? You can actually begin to get some of these things rolling now, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. My biggest thing, people have heard me say this, and it's not really my thing, but for me, natural language, it becomes code. Natural language to me is the purest form of low code. We've been always striving to get there from the days of writing kind of statements and easy to read language in BASIC and COBOL, all the way up to C#, C++. We're really just trying to make easy words to get to code, and now we can just tell our agents what to do, and they can generate that code for us. We're going to talk a little bit about creating a website in Dataverse, and also talk a little bit about security as well. So these are some of the benefits of building a website, but specifically hosting it in Power Pages. So we're going to kind of move on from here. Let me just context. So for those of you who've built Power Pages in the past, you've done this, you've tried that whole point and click configuration, and that's great. That's still a very viable thing today. You can use your model-driven forms and your lists, and you can add those to web pages. You can add security, and you can basically build something. So here's an example of a very simple portal that I made, I call it the traditional way, just for kind of logging support tickets. It's tied to, we have a authentication set up, and we're able to navigate that using the list component. And of course, there's a back-end model-driven app talking to Dataverse and all that kind of fun stuff. Now this is great. So this is where a lot of people might live, in something called the Design Studio or the Power Pages Management app. But even with this, eventually our customers are going to say, yeah, that looks fine, but it looks a little bit ugly. It's not exactly what we want. We want to have a different, unique interface. So in most of the Power Pages projects I worked on, I started working on Power Pages projects, there's also a certain level of customization or extension that we need to do. And this is where we start to get into JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and then into a language called Liquid. Now, Liquid is a markup language where we can begin to build customized web templates. Now, in what I've been already starting to do, and this is a lot of my day-to-day, because I do work on what we would call a lot of traditional Power Pages projects. I am living in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to talk about Visual Studio Code in a minute, but I'm also using Claude Code. I like using Claude. Of course, I could use GitHub Copilot, which I've used as well. I believe you could use other things like some of the OpenAI one, whatever that's called. I have it installed. But anyways, there's different coding agents we could use. And for instance, this particular web template, what I did was I described to Claude what I wanted to build. I already had a Dataverse MCP server wired in. And for those of you who don't know what an MCP server is, or a Dataverse MCP server, we will talk more about that. But essentially, it's the link back to Dataverse. So it was able to extract my schema names. It was able to create a fetch XML statement and be able to create my specific web template that I was able to load back up into Power Pages from Visual Studio Code. And then from there, I was able to get maybe not the prettiest interface in the world, but at least a slightly different customized interface. And if there was something that I didn't like, I could go back into Claude Code and describe, okay, make the backgrounds a little bit darker, make the date a little bit darker, move things around. I don't want it 3x6, or I want to change the layout and things like that. And then Claude Code, or the coding agents, can go through and manipulate the web templates and things like that, and very quickly allow us to build unique user interfaces within the context of what I would call classic Power Pages. But that's all well and good, and that's if you're working in that world today, that's great. But I think we're moving to a new world where we're going to be building something called single page applications within the context of the Power Platform and Power Pages specifically. So people might say, okay, well, why are we going to build single page applications in Power Pages? Because we're using things like React and other frameworks. Do we even need the Power Platform for that matter? Can't we just build the site, spin up an Azure or Amazon or any other cloud service and just host our site up there? Well, absolutely. That is a very viable solution. I've done that in the past. But the benefit of using single page applications in Power Pages is we have that Dataverse integration, the ability to very easily talk back and forth to Dataverse to, log things like tickets, pull up opportunity information. Members can sign in, see what their benefits are. You could sell digital products and distribute those through Power Pages. I have projects like that, volunteer management, a lot of different things. Things like built-in authentication. Do you really want to spend your time building your own authentication provider and your own linkages there? That is sometimes extremely frustrating to try to figure all that out. That's something that's just built into Power Pages. It's just some configuration. You can get that going. Not just the Microsoft ones. Today we'll just talk about Entra, but you could use it Entra external ID, or you can even tie it into other providers like LinkedIn or Facebook or that kind of thing. I've worked on a project where they're using Okta, which is another very popular authentication provider, and getting that to work with Power Pages was not that big of a deal. And of course, with Dataverse, we have the security already built in. We have table permissions. We have the Power Pages Web API. So if you're using the Dataverse Web API, that's a subset of that API. So very familiar on how that works. Of course, a lot of the roles, we have web roles, customized web roles. And then the big thing is the managed hosting. So we can build our site and then we can upload that into Power Pages where we have that hosting and scale. So depending on your licensing, if you decide to start selling Taylor Swift tickets, or I guess now if you're selling World Cup tickets, for example, if you build a site and you have the right licensing, then that site is going to scale to accommodate all the increased load as it expands. And that's something, again, you don't need to worry about because Microsoft has built the infrastructure along with firewalls, content delivery networks, and all of that other stuff, things that we don't need to worry about. So we can focus on what we do best is building applications and, developing our code. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the toolkit that we're going to need and set this all up. And so these are the things that are going to make this natural language way of building websites possible. First thing, Visual Studio Code. Now, probably a lot of you, if you're developers, you already have this installed. You probably have it configured 10 ways from Sunday. But if you're a Power Platform maker, if you have been living in the Power Platform Maker tools, or even if you're an admin working in the Power Platform Admin Center that we call PPAC, I would still encourage you to try to download Visual Studio Code and begin to get familiar with it, because basically, I am going to live in this interface for pretty much, excuse me, the duration of our entire demo. Not to say that those maker portals are they're still useful, but you can do a ton of stuff within one interface. So I know how a lot of us sometimes are context switching. We're going to the maker portal, but then we go to PPAC to set something else up. Then we might pop to some of the other tools, the XRM Toolbox, for example, do a fetch XML builder thing there. Then we have our system up and running. So we're context switching a lot. I find with Visual Studio Code, I can live in that one interface. For the most part, I'm going to load, the Claude terminal there and do a lot of that work there. And it kind of begins to zero in and do a few things. So again, don't be afraid of Visual Studio Code if you're a maker. It's more than just a developer tool. It's more of a way that we can work with our development agents. And then once you get Visual Studio Code installed, it has a bunch of extensions. And of course, there's a whole whack of very popular extensions for various things. I'm just going to talk about two specific extensions or three actually, that I install every time that I have a new computer or I'm setting this up for somebody. The first one is the Power Platform Tools. It's provided by Microsoft. It provides a whole set of tools as well as something called the Power Platform command line interface. Now that is something we could install separately and use it with PowerShell, but I like installing it this way because it keeps it updated every time I open VS Code, and it's going to give us a lot of these commands that our agentic tools are going to use, as well as ourselves as we're building out these solutions. The other one, now this is a bit of a preference for me. I like Claude Code and Claude. I use Claude Cowork. I have Claude open all the time. On one of my other machines, I have Claude working away at something else. These tools are amazing. Again, we can kind of pick different things. Claude Code for VS Code, that's an add-in. Once we install that, we're going to be able to use Claude Terminal or the Claude side panel as we're beginning to build things. In terms of this, you also need a subscription. I have the Mac subscription, which gives me a lot more than the Pro. I probably on the verge of, and maybe during this demo, I don't know, might have to pop up to the next level of Macs, because a lot of the things do burn a lot of tokens, but a lot of what we're doing today, we're going to sort of scratch the surface, but token management, I think, is going to be a big discussion in the next few months, especially as the prices go up on a lot of these things. We've heard about GitHub Copilot, how its pricing is changing as well. So all of a sudden, I think most of us have run into those token limits before, and very much like before my time, maybe. When we were writing programs in the old days, we had to make sure that it would fit within a certain amount of system memory, or if we're building something that would work online, making sure the bandwidth would work up so it wouldn't be so slow. We'd have to worry about resource management. And then eventually, as computers got more powerful, more memory, we thought, okay, we don't really need to worry about that. We can just write code. But now that we're into this AI agentic world, we're back into resource management. We want to make sure we're making good use of those tokens because they do get expensive. So the other one is, again, it's pick your flavor, GitHub Copilot chat. I do have this installed because I do use this quite a bit. Of course, it is sort of the kind of the Microsoft kind of family. But basically, for all intents and purposes, it works pretty much the same way as Claude does, with a few subtle differences. And again, we can install this as part of VS Code. And then we also need to make sure that we have a GitHub subscription with that, whether it's enterprise or business, and that it's going to sort of burn or use the capacity through that. So those are a couple add-ins that I install pretty much every time. Like I said, I'm installing VS Code. If you're using Power Platform stuff, at least, the Power Platform tools, as well as either GitHub Copilot Chat or Claude or both. Sometimes I flip between the two different ones depending on what I'm working on, because I know a specific tool is better for certain things than it is for others. There's a few other little caveats in there, but that could be a whole other discussion. There are a lot of other extensions to install depending on what you're doing. Today, we're just focused on Power Pages, so this is just what we need. However, if you're writing things like plugins, for example, there is the C# kit and the .NET build tools that we'll need. There's a few other things like that. So there's a lot of other extensions that you could add. You want to make sure you research them, make sure there's some from reputable providers as well. But you can really begin to get VS Code to do a lot of different things. All right, so let's actually go through and kind of talk a little bit about building the entire system here. So once we got VS Code up and running, then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just start up Claude Code. And how I'll do that, basically, let me just, actually, you can see the screen here, but basically what we'll do is in a terminal, we would actually type Claude. And I'm just going to actually let's just do a quick little demo here. So actually, I recorded a video, so we're going to see how well this works. You guys see the video all right? Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm just going to get it to go to the start here. So here, basically, I'm in Visual Studio Code. I launch a terminal, and then the first thing I do is I just type Claude. Or I could type Copilot, and it is going to come up with that Claude terminal. And again, don't be afraid of command lines. We're just giving it, again, natural language. And then the other thing I can do here is I can take a look at the skills. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about skills. Skills are something that they're markdown files. But what they'll help Claude do, what will help our agents do, is give them more very specific instructions on how to operate, how to work things, where to find things. There's some scripts sometimes involved. So here I actually just typed in skills, and I see I have a whole bunch of Dataverse skills installed. So when you install Visual Studio Code and all these things, this is a plugin, and it's in the documentation, but if you can't find it, I can definitely show you where that is. And I'm probably going to make some other videos on this. But basically, we have these skills that are going to help us do different things. So I have the Dataverse skills already installed. It's pretty straightforward to install these. They're usually on GitHub. They provide instructions. Once these are installed, the other thing that I did as well with Visual Studio Code is I connected to my environment using the auth profiles. So I've connected to actually just connected to my Power Platform tenant. And with that, first thing I'm going to do is, obviously I want an environment where I want to create my Power Pages site. So I'm just going to, first thing I'm going to do, again, natural language, I'm going to say create a new Dataverse environment. Now, normally we would go to the PPAC for this, the Power Platform Admin Center. But in this case, because I have those skills installed and the PAC CLI installed, Claude is going to do this work for me. So I can delegate it, or I could write these other scripts. So every time I want to set up an environment, I don't have to be clicking around. I can just get Claude to go do that, my agent to do this. So it's going through, it's telling me it's going to help me create the environment. It's, again, telling me the tools. Again, it's going to ask me for approval along the way. And I can say yes, or I can say everything for this session to help it move along. If you're new to these tools, see what it's doing, read the instructions, and it's perfectly okay for you to say, no, this isn't what I want to do. So here, for example, when we're creating an environment, it's going to ask me, do I want a developer environment, a sandbox, a production, or a trial? Again, if you don't know, you could chat about it to find it. Usually, Claude might give you a recommendation. In this case, I think I picked sandbox environment. So let's just continue on that. The reason I did that was because I think I've ran out of developer environments for my user. You know, you get 3 developer environments per user. In this case, I do have a little bit of capacity left, so I did pick a sandbox. So I'm just going to do the little, oh, here we go. And then the next thing is the region. Now, again, you'd want to pick a Dataverse environment close to where you are. I picked the US because usually it has the most new features and most of the new agentic features. So usually if I'm developing stuff, I will use that. It used to be in the olden days being a year ago, Canadian environments would be the first ones to get all the features. But in this case, I find with the AI stuff, usually the United States gets it first. So if I'm doing experimentation, I will put United States. So here we see through, it's asked me some more questions about the name of the environment. And now it's going through and creating that whole sandbox environment on my tenant. Says it takes a few minutes, and that's fine. Again, it will ask me a few questions along the way for reading files. And again, you just want to keep an eye on these things. So I'm just going to jump ahead, I think. So after a while, I'm just going to pause it here. It did create my environment. It gave me a summary. Here's the name. It's a sandbox. It's in the United States. Here's the URL for it. Here's my environment ID, my org ID, and the tenant in which it's created in. So again, I didn't actually log into PPAC at all. I basically got my agent to do that. So there's a lot of new administration skills that are happening that we can do a lot of that kind of work, again, within one environment. So I'm not context switching. I'm not flipping to another environment. I'm letting it kind of go through here on this. So we'll just sort of kick off. And basically what I want to do is, now that we've created that environment, I want to connect my workspace to this environment. What I mean by workspace, essentially, that's just the folder that I've opened up in Visual Studio Code. For this particular project, this is where I want to build my Power Pages SPA site, but this could be my model-driven app, this could be generative pages, this could be a plugin, this could be a bunch of different things, but I'm just going to hold it locally on my machine in a folder. Now, the other thing that this will do as well, this will also make this a GitHub repository. So if I want to do some source control, and of course we all do, we want to be able to connect that. Now, I don't really cover that here, but that's another thing that these tools provide, is the linkages into things like GitHub Source Control or Azure DevOps. So that way we can, anything that we do, we can keep that source control and actually see the changes over time. Really important. So now it's going through, it's asked me a few questions here and there. I'll just, again, to move things along to the next one. Now, of course, some of this won't run completely automatically. It is secure in a sense. It's going to need you to log in on your behalf. So think of this sometimes as a junior developer that's working on something and said, well, can you log in here for me? So this is what Claude Code is doing. It's asking you, hey, we need to log in. We need to, be able to access some of this stuff. And that's perfectly fair. So we'll run into this. And then it's going to set up this environment file. So this is very interesting because we're working in the context of a workspace or a workstation, a workspace within a folder. If you're like me, you probably have multiple clients, you have multiple projects on the go. So I need to keep these things separated. So in this particular case, I'm opening the folder to a specific area. It is creating what we call this environment file. This environment file will have the details of my specific Dataverse tenant. So that way, if I'm doing certain things, it's writing it to the correct tenant and not kind of cross path and accidentally writing to my production. We definitely don't want that. So this is why we want to kind of stay within the context of our workspace. So it will go through this information, and we will get to building a site soon. Just we would need to set up some of the infrastructure first. Now, again, here's something that's interesting. When it goes through the process with these Dataverse tools, when I said to connect, it is going to set up something called the Dataverse MCP server. So this is a great place to start. If you're fairly new to this stuff, go to the documents and set up a Dataverse MCP server. It's going to allow you to like read records, create records in Dataverse, but also create new tables, create columns, and then also create the relationships between those particular tables, but also get the schema names. So for some of you who have been developing may have going, oh, I need to find the schema name for a particular field. You've actually gone to the app, you've run the level up tools, you've pulled up the schema name, or you've gone to the customization. This is something that using the MCP server, we can extract pretty quickly, and the tools know to read that and to use, for the most part, the right logical and schema names. Although I had Claude the other day make an error because of the entity set names needed to be pluralized. It didn't do that. It didn't work. Claude actually went and read the Microsoft Learn, because I had the Microsoft Learn MCP server up and running, and it basically came back saying, okay, I found the error.
Ouais, je
but...
suis sur 2 autres réunions.
Oh, do we have a question?
Ça, c'est l'équipe de Microsoft, et ça, c'est un événement. Comment c'est?
All right. I think we just have someone who came off mute. All good.
Yeah, sorry about that, Nick. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. It's all good. We've all done it. All right. So basically here, like I said, with the MCP server, we're wiring that up. Now, in order to do this, it is asking me to restart here. So I had to restart this particular session. So we're continuing that along. So it basically restarted, and it said there's a prior conversation here. So the next thing I want to do after I've started that, now there is ways that we can continue the conversation. But the nice thing about this too is if we set up this project, what I like to do too is set up something called a memory file. So it will kind of keep track of everything that we've been working on. What I've also done is I've created a changelog file for a lot of my projects. And then in the instructions, the Claude MD file that gets created, I've said every time I make a significant change, please add it to the changelog. So that way, when I talk to my customers later, if something's changed, I can at least go to the changelog, or also when I'm doing my time entry, I can sort of see what I did as well. So these are the little things I've been picking up and learning along the way. Also documenting, when I document the code, I can use that for this. And also what I do sometimes is I'll recreate the prompts when I'm creating particular things. So a lot of interesting things we can do. But continuing along without going down too far down a rabbit hole and keeping an eye on the time, what I want to do is create a solution in Publisher. So this is something that, of course, that teach you on day one of Power Platform School when you're creating a new particular app or creating tables in Dataverse. If I've ever taught this course and a lot of the others, it's like create a solution in a publisher. Keep everything within solutions. This is just good ALM. Don't use a default solution to build your assets, because you're going to get those weird CR, whatever things on your Dataverse tables. But we don't need to go into the Maker portal and do that. I basically am just telling Claude, my agent, say, go and create a solution in a publisher. And I give it that command. And then there we go. It's thinking about it, and it knows, using those Dataverse skills, that it can go through and create that. Now, again, it's probably going to ask me a few questions along the way. That's fine. I'll agree to certain things or not. And then basically, I'm just going to move a little bit ahead. Again, it's asking me for the prefix. We want to make sure we have a prefix. It's giving me some options, or I could put in my own option. So that's pretty good. It's kind of proactively helping me out. I'm going to choose the second one there. And then moving on. So again, this usually takes a few minutes to create the solution in the publisher. But we see here it's gone through. It's created that in my environment. I have my publisher, Ready BMS, with a prefix RBMS, and the GUID along with that, and then my solution name as well. And again, I could have, part of the process as it's prompting me as I go through this, it will ask me those certain questions. So now I've got my solution publisher. That's good. So whether I'm building a model-driven app, a plugin, or a Power Pages site, at least we know it's all going to be in the correct solution there. All right, now the next thing was pretty interesting as I was going through this experiment is that I didn't install the, see what the next one is, oh, the plan. There we go. So here's another kind of key thing that I've been doing lately is, let me just kind of let that fill in here, is using the plan skill. Now this is something that's built into Claude. I think Copilot has something similar, but as opposed to for us just giving it a prompt saying, hey, I want to create a website, can you do this? Or we want to create some tables or break it all down that way. By giving it a plan, then I'm allowing Claude to begin to fill out the steps and kind of get a more comprehensive idea to the goal that I want to achieve. So basically, instead of just giving it a prompt to create something, I'm doing the /plan. Now, again, we want to be able to, that particular prompt, I've done other sessions on how we want to usually build a product requirements document or a solution infrastructure or like a vision document or a design or a spec. And then from that, be able to extract a prompt that we could give to an agentic tool, whether it's Plan Designer or some of these other ones. In this particular case, we do have beginning to have the sense that there's the plan that is built in directly into Claude. So I basically said, I want to plan, I want to build a website where users can view and log support tickets, very much like the other one I showed you earlier. They need to be associated to the logged in users. Tickets need a title, description, a date and a level of severity. And tickets should be stored in Dataverse. And the website should have a clean and modern look and feel. So very brief, but it kind of gives an idea what our project's all about. So this is the plan. And what happened was it went through. Now, the thing is, at this point, I had not installed the new Claude Power Pages plugins. And what happened was it came up and it said it cannot provision a brand new Power Pages site, because what it wanted to do is kind of provision that classic Power Pages site that we're used to. And it's true, the Power Platform admin tools, the PAC CLI, doesn't have the ability to create what I would call a traditional site. It does have the ability to clone one. So what I actually have on my machine, I have all the templates downloaded into a folder. So I still use this to create those types of sites, but I use the PAC Power Pages clone command, and it will create a copy of that. And basically, again, I'm able to use these tools. So it's kind of like creating it, but not. But in this case, I want to make an SPA. So it's given me some options here about the Power Pages. It's telling me I'm going to have to do a little bit of work on my own. So what I ended up having to do then is I installed the Power Platform tools. So we basically did that, and this is how you install the plugin. I do /plugin marketplace add Microsoft Power Platform skills. This is something you can copy directly from Microsoft Learn to allow you to install those Microsoft skills. And then the next thing, it basically installed that, which is good. The next thing I needed to do is install the plugins as well, and I missed that step here. Actually, it's somewhere in here. Do I have it? I usually set up a bookmark here, but basically there's two commands we need to run. We want to install both the Dataverse skills we did before, but also the Power Pages skills. Now I still have plan mode running here. And oh yeah, so I typed skills. And now that we've typed skills, we do see we have the Power Pages. And this is for those Power Pages SPA sites, those code sites. Activate the site, add sample data, add SEO, create the site, create web roles, deploy the site, admin connect. So it has all of these skills. Probably there's a few more that have installed. I think Microsoft is adding some more. They've added some more recently around ALM. And then in terms of the authentication, integrate the web API. So we have a whole bunch of these skills installed already, and we're going to utilize these as we continue to build our site. All right. Let's move on. So basically, we've gone back to our plan. Now, the thing is here, sometimes I'll be a little bit specific in the plan. Not that I don't trust Claude to understand what I'm saying, but again, sometimes a little bit more context is important. So I specified an SPA Power Pages website into this plan, and I did grab a screenshot of that so that I could have recorded that as well. And then basically we're gone back and said it's already in plan mode yet. That's fine. So eventually it's going to go through and begin to ask me questions because this is an SPA site. And again, we want to make sure that we could have specified that, but if it doesn't know, it's going to ask us. It's going to ask us if we want a framework we want to use. So React, Vue, Angular, Astro, or something else. React was the recommended one. I like using React because that essentially is what Microsoft is using to create generative pages, to create code apps. It seems to be sort of the popular one. That's to say, if you're using Vue or Angular for other things, or Astro, again, you can experiment with these different frameworks. But basically, it just gives you at least that option there. All right, so we picked, I think we picked React. I'm just going to kick off the video again and move ahead. And then authentication. So this is a new skill that's been added recently. So this actually makes you setting up the authentication for Power Pages a little bit more simpler. Now, for Microsoft Entra ID, this can be all automatic. So that means anybody that's in your Entra directory should be able to authenticate and log into that Power Pages site. The other one we could do is external with Entra External ID. That's the preferred one. Now, the reason why, which would be realistic, now I can do this later. The reason why I didn't do as part of this demo is it requires a lot of manual steps on the Entra External ID side, which I would have to go through. I'm assuming that there's skills involved in that, but that sort of means we have to kind of switch gears a little bit. So for now, I just picked the Microsoft Work accounts, but just be aware that I believe that this particular skill is going to get better and better, and hopefully we'll be at a point where we can actually do it all from this train of thought or this one different session. So we've set that up. And then the other thing is it's asking me about the aesthetic. Would we want to, and that's in terms of the look and feel. Do we want minimal and clean? Do we want bold and vibrant? We want dark and moody? I'm not a designer. I am what you call a citizen designer, meaning I do tools. And then here it's asking me a few things specifically on the Dataverse setup about the severity of the tickets. And then finally at the end, before it does anything, it kind of gives me an opportunity to review the answers to the questions and allows me to maybe stop or reevaluate something. Like, maybe I didn't want React. Maybe I wanted to use Angular. Maybe I kind of wanted to change the severity levels on my particular app. But for the most part, this looks good, and we're just going to continue on and let that run. Submit those answers. And again, just for the magic of webinars, I did pre-record this video. This entire end-to-end process probably took an hour and a half. So that's why you see me speeding along as I'm going through this, as opposed to you folks just watching my Claude burn tokens and go through the whole process. But we see here it is going through. It's writing the plan. And then eventually I will get to the plan here, and it kind of gives me that whole overview of the plan. The other thing here is, now how do I want to move forward with implementing this plan? If this is the first time you've done this, I would recommend using the manually approve the edits. A couple reasons. First off, you want to see what Claude's doing, but also from a learning perspective, it will kind of narrate what it's doing, the decisions it's making. And I think as a solution architect, it's important for you to review and think about these things. You might kind of learn how these agents think and how they operate, and that might help you with your own prompting and designing and planning this out in the future. So, but for now, I just kind of clicked it on use the auto mode, or I've also heard this called as the YOLO mode, meaning what's the worst that could happen? This is a throwaway environment. If this is an actual true development thing with your customers, then you probably want to go be a little bit more careful with this, but that's basically how we can kind of kick this off. So we say, yes, use the auto mode, and it's kind of going through and it's reviewing the context. And then it's basically going to kick off and do this thing. Now it's probably going to ask me a couple more questions along the way. But we see here, it creates a checklist, which is pretty cool because we can kind of follow that process. We see here it's creating the site. It's creating that scaffold React site. So if you've built React sites from ground up before, you kind of know about the scaffolding and trying to build out those certain things. We're going to talk about the data model, the deploy, and the activate site, and those other things. Now, this will take a while. So when I move ahead, eventually, probably I'd say after 5-10 minutes, we're going to actually see our website up and running. Now, before you get too excited, this is all dummy data. It's not real data. It's just there to give you an idea what the site will look like. We see here we have the, our menu across the top. We have the guest user. We have some other content in here. It looks pretty good. Maybe I'd probably make a few different changes and things like that, but at least we're beginning to see how this site is going to work, which is pretty exciting. And it's all running locally on your machine. It's not being hosted up somewhere. It's locally here, so we can actually begin to see how this sort of site will take a look like. All right, so this is running, and again, it's going to continue on. The next one. So this to me is pretty powerful. If we probably look at how many of you probably get really tired going into the Maker portal, creating a new table, creating a field, creating another field, forgetting about the field, renaming the field, going back. Okay, now we create the other table, go through, create the relationship between the tables, and then create a bunch more. So this is extremely tedious and boring work, and it drives me nuts. This is why I love having an agent do that. So this particular agent is creating the data model. It's creating the support ticket table. If there's other tables that it would create those as well. It's actually linking it to my out-of-the-box contact table. That's part of the common data model. And again, this will take time, but this is something, while this is running, you could go off and do other work in parallel. You can let the agent go and build out your entire data model in Dataverse. Now, if you remember, we created the publisher and the solution. So these assets are going to be created there. And again, we have not left Visual Studio Code. We have not left the Claude terminal. We've not gone to the Maker portal at all. It's basically done everything for us so far within that particular interface, which is pretty cool. So it's going to go through that, and eventually it created the entity and the entity set name. Now it's going through doing that first deploy site, which is now uploading that Power Pages single page application, and that will go, basically chug for a little while. It's activating the site, meaning once it's uploaded, it's going to take that and activate the site. So these are things, if we were creating a Power Pages site, we'd be clicking away within the Power Pages Design Studio to make that happen. Claude's doing all this work for us. The other thing it's kind of doing here, it's creating the web roles. It's creating the authenticated user role is there by default, but it will create any other specialized roles depending on the plan, depending on the system that we're building. So we'll let that chug for a while. And the other thing is, now the thing is for single page application sites, whereas when we're creating something, the Power Pages site using the forms and the views, that's sort of wired into Dataverse kind of on the back end. Here it's using the Power Pages web API, which if you built regular Power Pages site, you might have run into this before, which is pretty cool. Basically, but that's sort of the way that our React site is going to interact with Dataverse, is using the API. So it's going to integrate that. It will also take a look at things like server logic and the client-side code, which are fairly new libraries as well, depending on what your requirements are. So it's going to be chugging away. So I'm just going to fast forward a little bit. Other thing I wanted to point out here is site settings. So for those of you who have built regular Power Pages sites before and used the Portal Web API, you remember you need to set up the site settings to make sure the particular tables and columns are accessible. Don't use the star for fields, specify which columns. Again, our agent knows this. It is creating the value here. It's only picking the particular columns that should be exposed with the web API and not everything. So that's, again, the whole security being built in as part of this process. And it's going through and setting those records up for us within the Dataverse that's going to be hosting the Power Pages. So doing that, it's integrating that web API. It's setting up the authentication. Again, because this is Entra ID, it's fairly automatic. We don't really need to do anything, but this means anybody with an Entra ID will be able to log into our portal. That will take a few minutes. Again, bumping ahead. Now it's going to add some sample data as well. Now, depending on what you're working on, probably a lot of you building Power Pages solutions or Power Apps or anything model-driven apps, your data is probably full of all the Simpsons characters, probably different variations of Chuck Norris, probably Game of Thrones characters as well, because you're typing this in as test data. Thankfully, our agent can create that test data for us. It's probably more realistic based on what our customer requirements are. If you wanted to use Chuck Norris, you still can. You can even tell your agent to use, maybe characters from the Flintstones for sample data. But for now, we are getting that added directly to our site. So we're able to have something to work with as we're doing our development. And that saves a ton of time. You think about how much time it takes to create sample data. That was one of the very first things I started using AI for. Like when I first got ChatGPT, I'm like, okay, build me a CSV file with sample data. And I went and did it. And I was like, pretty cool. All right. So we're evolving where these agents are kind of doing all this stuff for us. All right, so now that we've kind of gone through, it's basically going through and checking out a few things, making sure the site is live and making sure it's sort of ready. Now, a couple things that will happen as it goes through this, just sort of move on. So finally, I see my site, and this is a live version of that. I'm signing in, and it comes up. And you see that I am signed in there with my name using authentication. It is, now notice here, immediately I got an error message that came up right away. So something happened along the way. Let me just try to create a new ticket and sort of see what happens here. So I sort of, again, fill in some information. And again, this is a live site. It is running within the context of Power Pages. We see here the look and feel looks pretty interesting. Of course, we fill in all the other information to submit ticket. And by doing that, I immediately got an error message. So the interesting thing here is, and I got that other error message, what I'll typically do in this case is instead of trying to go back and debug it or even just tell Claude that I got an error message, I'll take a screenshot. I will screenshot the error, and then I will drag it into here. So actually you see me here, I'm dragging it in, and immediately it sees that particular screenshot. And I don't even give it context sometimes, depends on what I'm working on. And then basically it will take a look at that screenshot, and then it will try to identify, look at it, what the error is. And then we can go back and forth and iterate. And a lot of times it will say, oh, it means this. Now, in other cases, I've also found that if it can't understand the screenshot, it will give you specific instructions on how to use the dev tools. It will say, open up the dev tools, look at the network tab, capture that, put that in the chat window, tell me what you're seeing. And then from there, we have that back and forth to be able to both kind of enhance it and debug the whole system along the way. So basically that sort of kind of rounds out part of that. So let's just actually, let's get out of my window here. And then what I can do is show you guys. Do I have it? Yeah. So basically, here's my site. And this is actually the site that got created. And I actually now fixed it up. We've seen this part. It's logging in using Entra ID. It is private. That's by default. We see here I have my tickets. It's displaying that information. I can add a brand new ticket. And now here's the other thing. Another tip for anybody. I don't use my keyboard as much as I used to. I use my microphone. I have something called Whisper Flow. And what it allows me to do is when I'm working with these agents, instead of typing the instructions, I will tell it the instructions. So here I'm just going to say, this is a test case. And then I'll say, this is an issue working with the Power Pages site, and I'm trying to debug it. And by using more and more voice, it's way faster than me typing. For those of you who've seen my other demos, you've probably seen me make spelling mistakes and all this other stuff when I'm trying to type in front of people. More and more, I'm using my microphone when I'm actually talking to my agents or doing anything. It's funny, my wife's in the next office over, and she's like, "Are you talking to somebody?" Like, "Yeah, I'm talking to Claude. We're having a chat on building something." So I have the date here. I can pick my different things. I can submit my ticket, and so here it's actually showing up in here. Now, if I really wanted to, I can basically go into Let's just go into the design studio. So this is the first time we're actually into the Maker portal all day. I've been living and breathing in Visual Studio Code. So when this kind of comes up, I can prove to you that this is actually really working. As soon as it is done thinking about it, this is actually live. Now notice that my pages and my styling are grayed out. That's because it's a single page application. But if I look at my support ticket table, the data workspace, we see here that those records are being created in Dataverse from our Power Pages site. So basically, I kind of gave a full fire hose. We lived and breathed in Visual Studio Code. And if I just kind of go back up, I'm going to quickly, I have the deck here with pretty much all the screenshots as well. We have a few minutes left over for, hold on, let me get this one. Actually, And so, yeah, I will upload this this deck so you guys have it as well. Why did this do that? All right, so basically what we look at today is we use these agentic tools. We loaded Visual Studio Code, we loaded the Power Platform tools, we loaded the Dataverse skills. Those are sort of the minima, and also Claude Code or Agent. But with these things, not only Power Pages, but I've used this to create plugins. I've used this to create generative pages. I've used this to create code apps. I'm also using these tools to create and modify, and also model-driven apps as well. But for the most part, I'm using this as well to work on my traditional Power Pages projects in terms of creating liquid templates, JavaScript, these types of things. I find that, yes, these agents will kind of do this work for you, but it's important that you as a solution architect supervise or understand what's going on for a couple of reasons. First off, you don't want it to go down a rabbit hole, but also from a case of this is your value. You're the value. You're the ones talking to the customers. You're the ones understanding their real needs. So this way, when you're developing solutions using these agentic tools, you're basically taking those human cases and really just using this as a tool. This isn't something that's going to take your job. It's going to change your job. My job has changed a lot, but it's a lot of fun. I can be a lot more creative. I can get a lot more productivity done. I can build things like you saw that ticket site. If you asked me a year ago to build a site that looks like that, man, that'd probably take me like definitely a few weeks in terms of getting the styling right and everything like that. Because I'm not, like I said, I'm not a designer. The colors and the curves and all that kind of thing. But even the things with the cards, getting that display to work a certain way, that would take a lot of work with Liquid and JavaScript to get that working. So again, it's an exciting new world, and I think there's a lot of great opportunities for people working in the Power Platform. The skills that we've had before in terms of how Dataverse works, data modeling, processing, all of those skills definitely are so valuable. But now we have tools that can achieve certain things a lot faster. So with that, I will basically, in the last 5 minutes, if there's anybody has any questions at all, more than happy to entertain that or chat about anything.
Yeah, so we have two questions. We have first question from Jeff. Jeff, you want to unmute yourself or let me call it out for you? So Jeff have a question. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, question. So it seemed like the default mode for the AI agent was to give you a brand new table that was fresh, not reuse existing Dataverse Dynamics 365 type tables. How would I direct it to utilize that?
So basically, that's a good point. Now, the reason in my particular case why I created a new ticket table was I'm basically using the core Dataverse. I don't have the Dynamics 365 apps enabled. So therefore, I don't have the incident or the knowledge articles or SLAs or all that stuff. That being said, if I wanted to use those tables because I was licensed, I had the Dynamics 365, what I would do in my instructions, I would call it out and I would basically say, please use the case table. Please use the now, if you notice, it did use the contact table. It didn't. Earlier versions of some of these tools, like Plan Designer, was notorious for creating its own contact or person table. these things are getting a little bit smarter at taking a look at the Dataverse common data model. So if I actually had Dynamics 365 installed, I would probably say, yeah, use the incident table, use the SLAs, use the knowledge articles. I wouldn't necessarily have to call them out exactly, because with the MCP server, it could actually query it to get the specific schema names as well. But definitely a good point. So these are the things that, as we're setting up our instructions or our prompts or putting our plans together, sometimes we need to call out. And I've done this lots of times with Claude, when I said, like, whoa, don't do this. Stop. This is what we want, and basically reprompting it or changing the instructions to kind of guiding it. So very much like a junior developer, kind of like, oh, I'm going to create my own table. Like, okay, no, Bob, hold on. We're going to use this instead. So that's sort of the attitude I take. I treat Claude like a junior developer, that I basically can do some stuff, but I still got to keep my eye on him.
Great. We have one more question. Muralidhar, can you? Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Nick. This was really helpful. So I have been developing Power Pages from the last couple of years now, not now, but in my previous organizations. And as you said, I have been there from the scratch and doing manually all the tables and all. But this seems to be very fantastic. My question was, majorly this Power Pages is for the external users. So for that external users, there is some registration page that's default being provided in the Power Pages. So I just don't want to, showcase that external page to the external users. Rather create my own process of registering an external users. I know there is the Facebook and LinkedIn, all the integration is over there, but I just want to create their own username, password, and there should be an approval process and everything should be done. So will that be automatically done by agent, or as you said, that still I need to keep an eye on that?
So do you mean like the regular, the out of the, like in the traditional sense, the local authentication where like, yeah, so I mean, you could do that. I'm still like, I get it. Like even with the Entra ID I used Entra ID because it worked out of the box. I didn't have to do configuration. But if you're using like something like Entra external ID, it does have a registration process. I've seen in other implementations where we've had customers, they just created a form, they filled that out, and we had processes to, for instance, register them in Okta or register them in Azure AD B2C and do the authentication that way. I think it's still important, and that could be a whole other conversation about, it is important to still use those external authentication providers, because they do add a level of security, multi-factor authentication, password resetting, things that you as an administrator really don't want to have to pull your hair out on. But that's basically, so yeah, like in my case, I didn't create a self-registration, but that's something we could have done to say, hey, we want our users to be able to register on the site and build a process to approve or get them in or automatically give them access. And we could use tools to build that depending on what you need to do.
Because in Power Pages, we do have a features to invite, send an invite to the users and external users and all that. So that's what. So just wanted to check out whether Claude can do all that process and automatically create a flow at the back end, which we can.
Some of it. At this point, there's still a bit of manual work. Like, again, AI is not going to take our jobs, because there's certain jobs that we still need smart people like us to do.
Agreed. So does it even
100%.
help with SharePoint and Power BI integrations as well?
Sorry?
Does it even help with the SharePoint and Power BI integrations?
I've not tried that. But yeah, it like with anything, right? At the end of the day, it's code. So I would say it's probably possible, but again, it's all about the prompting and what code is getting generated. Even if I were to do it from scratch, I'm not sure how I would approach that, but it should be doable.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Amir.
And it looks like in terms of on that question, I see the chat now. Nice seeing Nikita here as well. Hopefully, I had a sneaky suspicion Nikita was here, so that's why I called out on site settings to use field names, because he freaks out when I use the star. But it does sound like he has a white paper here for onboarding about not using the out of the box. Yeah, I agree, not using the out of the box local authentication. So, yeah, thanks Nikita for sharing that. I'm very curious to get it myself.
I worked with Nikita before. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Nikita. So we have only 2 questions left. I don't know how much time you have, Nick. but if not, I can ask them to reach out to you on LinkedIn. It's up to you.
Yeah, no, I have a few minutes for sure.
Yeah,
we're
wonderful.
all here. Why not?
Yeah, sure. Wonderful. So, Joanne, have a question. Have you tried to change or maintain existing Power Pages sites, like built in traditional way, with the agentic tools?
Absolutely. I basically went through a couple projects where we had to convert from the standard data model to the enhanced data model. AI basically saved us a lot of time working on those particular projects. So basically how that works, and I kind of showed it briefly at the start, is with those Power Platform command line interfaces, we can download a traditional site, whether it's a standard model data site or enhanced data model site. We can download the site metadata locally to our machine. And then with Visual Studio Code, with Claude or GitHub Copilot installed, I can basically say, take a look at this web template, take a look at this web page code, and refactor it or add certain things. So I've actually done some work, quite a bit of work. Pretty much all the work I do on traditional Power Pages sites, and I have a couple projects on the go now. I do most of my work within Visual Studio Code. And that even goes to the point of building these web templates. And the thing is, I've created some of my own skills that hopefully I'll be able to share later on GitHub, like not this week, it's still a work in progress, but things like on how it wires up to entity forms or basic forms and that type of thing. For it to generate liquid code and the whole structure, it's amazing of what both Claude and GitHub can do. Been able to do a lot of things in a shorter amount of time than if I did it from scratch. So that was my long-winded answer. The short answer is yes, absolutely. These tools are a lifesaver for traditional Power Pages projects.
Yep, and I think we have a last question with my friend Louis from Vancouver.
Hey, Samir.
Hey.
Good to see you guys. Thank you for the invite. Actually, it was so awesome, Nick. Thank you for putting this together. And Samir as well for the invitation. This is not a technical question, Nick. It's more about from your experience as in the industry. We know the world is changing. There's a lot of AI. There are things that we can do. The common thing that some organizations, they say they don't want to do custom development. From your experience and what you see out there, when would you recommend using an off-the-shelf products versus a custom app? Because we can use Freshdesk, we can use HubSpot, we can use Dynamics, and so on. What are your honest take on this?
So ever since I started from doing back in even the Great Plains days, for those of you who remember that from way back, always in CRM especially, we just want to use the out-of-the-box features and just keep it simple. And probably that conversation goes maybe 3 or 4 days before, but we want it to do this. Can it do this? Like it can do that, but now we're talking custom code. Well, a little bit of customization is all right? So at the end of the day, you're right. If you're doing a ticketing system, things like Dynamics 365, customer self-service is a great tool, or even something like Rapid Start CRM. There's other tools. But even with all of these tools, there's always a certain level of what we call personalization on top of all of this stuff. Now, the biggest worry about, and this is probably a bigger conversation, is with customization, there's a couple different worries about that. First off, it is expensive, or it traditionally always been, to customize something. But then the other thing is that code, what happens when the developer disappears off into the wilderness, never to be heard from again? And then also you work with a partner and all you got was the compiled code. You only got the managed solutions. What do you do there? So this is where, even take AI out of the equation, this is where if you're working with a partner, if you're a customer working with a partner, or if you're a partner working with your customers, I think it's actually good self-service, or to be able to have them have access to at least the configuration. Now, the interesting thing with the AI tools, we're getting into this now, is we're creating code apps and all this other stuff. Yes, provide the source code, but also what I have been doing as well is after I go through and create a whole series of web templates, or I create something or a model-driven app, I also do a couple things. I basically tell Claude or whatever agent I'm doing is document this for me. and create it for me in a raw markdown file, and it will go through and document it. And then I'm able to put that in the Azure DevOps Wiki. And it's really for either myself or for future developers. Developers hate to document. I know this, I'm not the biggest fan either, but these are something that agents can help us with. So I've inherited a couple projects. I've been brought in on portals that have been built by someone that has long since gone, and I'm looking at the code kind of like, what are they thinking? I've gotten Claude to go through and it will find out and said, here's the structure, here's the plan, here's why this is. And even Claude found, I had a customer, I know I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but I had a customer and they said their portal was really slow. Of course, every customer says that, but I took a look and looked at it and like, okay, this code looks pretty complex. And working with Claude, I think it was either Claude Code or it might have been GitHub Copilot at that time, basically said, kind of diagnose this code, what's going on. And we found that it was doing serve back and forth to the server. It was showing a list of records, but for every record, it was going back to the server 50 times for just because it get caught into these loops. So if you were displaying even 20 records on the page, it was going back and forth to the server like hundreds of times. So because of that, I was able to refactor that code. Now, if I just didn't have an AI tool, I would have found it eventually, but I would have had to spend probably days going through line by line to figure all that out. So going back to the original question about customization, yeah, customization used to be expensive. It still is, but now with the tools, a lot of those objections about customization, about, you know, it's complex, no one understands it. Well, we have these tools that can understand it. Well, what if the developer goes off somewhere? Okay, great. We have these tools that are going to help us refactor something as long as we have the source code there. So that's the other thing. This is why source code and GitHub repositories are so important. So I think at the end of the day, there is still a market for off-the-shelf tools, but again, this is very philosophical. I have yet to run into a customer that has ever used, for instance, Dynamics 365/CRM 100% out of the box. I think there's always a little bit of something extra that we do. And then at the end of the day, Power Platform is a development platform, whether you call it low code, pro code, AI code generated. It is a platform to build unique line of business applications. So customization is just part of our lives. So anyways, that's just, again, I'm not sure if I answered your questions and went down a bit of a rant, but hopefully you found it helpful. Thanks, Louis.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think that is the end of the hands-on hour. What I did, Nick, I mentioned to any further question, they'll reach out to you on LinkedIn directly so that we can be done. But this was fantastic. Thank you so much, Nick, for your time and the demos and sharing with us what the agentic Power Pages building looks like. And we always learn something new when you are on. So to everyone who joined us live today, thank you for showing up and for your great question in the chat. The recording will be shared on a YouTube channel, so feel free to pass it along to your team. I not only shared the Cloud Community YouTube channel, but I shared the YouTube channel of Nick as well. So please go ahead and subscribe and get back to us if you have any more topics you want to call on, right?
And I promise to get more videos up there. I realized my last one was in February. So, and it was on this topic actually.
Nice, you post more.
Yeah, I know. That's just getting the time.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. So thank you so much, guys. We have a new session coming up in a hands-on hour on 3rd July with Isha Kapoor. It's about adding a custom connector with the REST or Open API tool in Copilot Studio agents. So if you're working in a Copilot Studio, that will be the one you don't want to miss out. So please register for the next hands-on hour, and I'll see you there. Thank you so much, Nick. Thanks again.
Guys.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Take
Nick.
care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.